The Zorian Empire knew their species was fucked, but they hadn't planned on humans swooping in to fix it. Captain James Maxwell of the Earth Federation's starship Prometheus gripped the distress message printout in his hand, knuckles white. An urgent call from the alien Zorian Empire begging for help. A plague was wiping them out. Maxwell knew humanity had no love for the Zorians. They'd been enemies for a century. But this plague was unnatural, a bioweapon, and it threatened the whole galaxy if it jumped to other species. He had to act. His ship touched down on the Zorian homeworld. Soldiers leveled plasma rifles at him. The Zorian Emperor glared at him with suspicion and hostility. He had to convince them to let him help. If he failed, the Zorians would go extinct, and if he couldn't find the cure in time, the plague could spread and wipe out humanity next. The clock was ticking. Dr. Novak rubbed her bleary eyes, fighting off exhaustion as she peered into the microscope. She had lost track of how many hours she had been in the lab, studying samples of the plague that was ravaging the Zorian population. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. If she couldn't find a cure, an entire species could be wiped out. She adjusted the focus, her breath catching in her throat as she noticed something peculiar about the bioweapon's genetic structure. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before, a complex web of DNA that seemed to be constantly evolving and adapting. But there, hidden among the twisting strands, was a potential weakness, a tiny flaw in the design that could be exploited. Dr. Novak leaned back in her chair, her mind racing with possibilities. If she could find a way to target that weakness, she might be able to develop a cure. But it wouldn't be easy. She would need access to advanced technology and resources that the Zorians simply didn't have. She glanced at the clock, realizing that she was late for her meeting with Captain Maxwell. She gathered up her notes and hurried out of the lab, her thoughts still swirling with the implications of her discovery. Meanwhile, Captain Maxwell and Lieutenant Commander Reeves were deep in discussion, poring over the intelligence reports they had gathered on the Crador. They had uncovered a disturbing pattern. The Crador had been secretly infiltrating Zorian society for years, sabotaging their defenses and leaving them vulnerable to attack. "They've been playing the long game," Reeves said, his jaw clenched with anger, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Maxwell nodded grimly. "And now they've unleashed this plague as part of their plan. We have to stop them before it's too late." They knew they needed more information, and there was only one way to get it, by capturing a high-ranking Crador operative. It was a risky move, but they had no choice. As they made their plans, tensions were rising between the humans and the Zorians. Many Zorians blamed the humans for their current predicament, accusing them of bringing the plague to their world. There were calls for the humans to be expelled from the planet, and some even suggested taking them hostage to force their cooperation. Emperor Zorthak struggled to maintain control over his people, his own grief and desperation threatening to overwhelm him. He had already lost so many of his own family members to the plague, and he knew that time was running out. In the streets, protests and riots were breaking out as the Zorians demanded action. The palace guards had their hands full trying to keep the peace, and there were whispers of a possible coup attempt. Dr. Novak burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. "Captain, I think I might have found something," she said breathlessly. Maxwell and Reeves looked up, their attention immediately focused on the doctor. "What did you find?" Maxwell asked. Dr. Novak explained her discovery, the potential weakness in the bioweapon's genetic structure. But she also emphasized the challenges they would face in developing a cure. Maxwell's brow furrowed as he listened, weighing the options in his mind. He knew that they needed the Zorians' cooperation if they were going to have any chance of success, but he also knew that trust was in short supply at the moment. He exchanged a glance with Reeves, a silent communication passing between them. They had to tread carefully, navigating the delicate political situation while also doing everything in their power to stop the Crador and find a cure for the plague. "Let me talk to Zorthak again," Maxwell said finally. "I'll do my best to convince him to work with us. In the meantime, Keep working on analyzing that weakness. We need to move fast if we're going to save their people and stop this plague from spreading." Reeves nodded, his expression determined. "I'll assemble my team on the double." He turned to go, pausing only briefly for them to wish each other luck. There was no time for lengthy goodbyes, not with the fate of an entire species hanging in the balance. Captain Maxwell stared at the blinking communication console, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision he was about to make. He knew that revealing the existence of the plague to the Earth Federation could lead to a full-scale war with the Credor, but with each passing day more Zorian lives were lost. He couldn't stand by and watch an entire species be wiped out. He took a deep breath and opened a secure channel to Earth. "This is Captain James Maxwell of the Prometheus. I have an urgent message for the Federation Council." The response came quickly, the face of Admiral Akira Tanaka appearing on the screen. "Captain Maxwell, this is an unexpected communication. What's the situation?" Maxwell detailed the events of the past few weeks, the discovery of the plague and the Credor's involvement. He held nothing back, emphasizing the severity of the threat and the need for immediate action. Admiral Tanaka listened intently, his expression growing more somber with each word. "This is a grave situation, Captain. The Credor's actions cannot go unanswered. I will convene an emergency meeting of the Federation Council and request that reinforcements and resources be sent to aid in the development of a cure." Maxwell felt a glimmer of hope, but it was short-lived. He knew that the arrival of human ships in Zorian space would only further inflame tensions between the two species. His fears were confirmed when the first Federation ships entered Zorian orbit. The streets erupted in chaos, with Zorians protesting what they saw as a prelude to an invasion. Emperor Zorthak struggled to maintain control, his own people turning against him for allowing the humans to intervene. In the midst of the turmoil, Dr. Novak and her team worked tirelessly to synthesize a cure using the advanced technology provided by the Federation. They had made progress, but time was running out. Every minute that passed meant more Zorian lives lost. As if the situation couldn't get any worse, a splinter faction of Zorian extremists emerged, led by the charismatic and ruthless Zorkar. They saw the humans as the true enemy, and launched a series of attacks against the Prometheus and her crew. Lieutenant Commander Reeves rushed into the command center, his face grim. "Captain, we have reports of multiple explosions in the city. Zorkar's faction has targeted our supply lines and is attempting to sabotage Dr. Novak's work." Maxwell slammed his fist on the console, frustration and anger boiling over. "We can't let them succeed. Reeves, assemble a team and secure the lab. We need to protect Dr. Novak and her team at all costs." As Reeves left to carry out his orders, Maxwell turned to the view screen where Emperor Zorthak's face was etched with worry. "Emperor, I know our presence here has caused unrest among your people, but we cannot let Zorkar's faction derail our efforts. We must work together to stop the Credor and find a cure." Zorthak nodded, his voice strained. "I understand, Captain. I will do what I can to quell the unrest and ensure that Dr. Novak's work can continue unimpeded." The Credor, sensing an opportunity in the chaos, launched their own attacks targeting key Zorian infrastructure and attempting to sabotage the cure. Maxwell and his crew fought back, engaging in fierce battles both on the ground and in space. The Prometheus shuddered as another blast rocked the ship. Alarms blared and crew members scrambled to their stations. Maxwell gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. They had been fighting off Credor attacks for hours, and the ship was taking a beating. "Shields down to 30%, the tactical officer shouted over the din. "We can't take much more of this, Captain." Maxwell gritted his teeth. "Divert all available power to shields and weapons. We have to hold them off long enough for Dr. Novak to finish the cure." In the lab, Dr. Novak and her team worked feverishly, sweat dripping down their faces as they raced against time. They were close, so close to a breakthrough. Just a few more tests, a few more adjustments. The lab doors burst open, and Lieutenant Commander Reeves rushed in, his face smeared with soot and blood. "Dr. Novak, we need to evacuate. Zorkar's faction has breached the perimeter and is headed this way." Dr. Novak shook her head, her eyes blazing with determination. "No, I can't leave, not now. We're so close to a cure. I just need a little more time." Reeves hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He understood the weight of what was at stake. "Okay, but we need to hurry. My team will hold them off as long as we can." As Reeves and his team took up defensive positions, Dr. Novak and her colleagues worked with renewed urgency. The sounds of battle grew louder, explosions and weapons fire echoing through the halls. In the command center, Maxwell watched the situation unfold on the view screen, his heart pounding in his chest. They were running out of time. If Dr. Novak couldn't find a cure, if the Crader succeeded in their sabotage, then all hope would be lost. Suddenly Dr. Novak's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain Maxwell, we've done it. We have a cure." Maxwell felt a surge of relief and hope, but it was short-lived. The Crader, sensing their impending defeat, launched a final, desperate attack. The Prometheus shook violently as a barrage of missiles slammed into her hull. "Captain, we've lost propulsion," the helmsman cried out. "We're dead in the water." Maxwell's mind raced, searching for a solution. They had the cure, but they needed to get it to the Zorians before it was too late. He turned to Reeves, who had just returned from the lab with Dr. Novak and her team. "Reeves, take a shuttle and get that cure down to the surface. We'll hold off the Crader as long as we can." Reeves nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Aye, Captain." As Reeves and Dr. Novak boarded the shuttle, Maxwell turned to his crew. "This is it, people. We've come too far to let the Crader win now. Let's show them what humanity is made of." The crew responded with a resounding cheer, their resolve strengthened by their captain's words. They fought with everything they had, pouring their hearts and souls into the battle. On the surface, Emperor Zorthak rallied his own forces, leading the charge against Zorkar's faction and the Crader infiltrators. The streets of the capital city became a battleground, with Zorians and humans fighting side by side against a common enemy. Reeves and Dr. Novak fought their way through the chaos, the cure clutched tightly in their hands. They had to get it to the Emperor, to distribute it to the Zorian people before it was too late. As they approached the palace, a group of Crader soldiers emerged from the shadows. Weapons trained on the shuttle. Reeves cursed under his breath, knowing they were outgunned and outmatched. But just as the Crader were about to open fire, a blast of energy slammed into them from behind. Emperor Zorthak stood tall, a smoking blaster in his hand and a fierce determination in his eyes. "Go," he shouted to Reeves and Dr. Novak. "Get the cure to my people." Reeves nodded, and the shuttle lifted off, racing toward the Zorian medical centers. The cure was distributed quickly, and within hours the tide began to turn. The plague, which had claimed so many lives, was finally being pushed back. On the Prometheus, Maxwell and his crew fought with renewed vigor, knowing that their mission was almost complete. They had faced impossible odds, but they had persevered. They had saved a species from extinction and prevented a galactic war. As the last Crader ship exploded in a burst of flame and debris, Maxwell allowed himself a moment of relief. They had done it. They had won. But even as he savored the victory, he knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The Zorians and the humans had fought together, but the wounds of the past would take time to heal. Trust would have to be rebuilt, and old animosities would have to be set aside. But for now, in this moment, they could celebrate. They had achieved the impossible, and they had done it together. Lieutenant Commander Reeves burst into Captain Maxwell's quarters, his face pale and his hands trembling. "Captain, you need to see this," he said, his voice unsteady as he handed over a datapad. Maxwell took the device, his brow furrowing as he scanned the contents. His eyes widened in disbelief as he read the damning evidence Reeves had uncovered. "This can't be right," he muttered, looking up at Reeves. "Admiral Novak, Dr. Novak's mother. She's been working with the Crader." Reeves nodded grimly. "I double and triple-checked the data. It's true, sir. Admiral Novak has been collaborating with the Crador, helping them create the bioweapon that's ravaging the Zorians. Maxwell sank into his chair, his mind reeling. Admiral Ilara Novak was a legend in the Earth Federation, a brilliant strategist and a champion of human supremacy. He had always admired her, even if he didn't always agree with her methods. But this was beyond the pale. Why would she do this, he asked, more to himself than to Reeves. Reeves hesitated for a moment before replying. According to the data, she believes that the Zorians and other alien species are a threat to human dominance in the galaxy. She sees the plague as a way to ensure that humans remain the top dogs. Maxwell felt a wave of revulsion wash over him. The idea that someone in the Federation, someone he had trusted and respected, could be capable of such a thing was sickening. He stood up, his jaw clenched with determination. "We have to stop her," he said. "We have to find a way to expose her treachery and secure the cure." Reeves nodded in agreement. "But, sir, we have to be careful. We don't know who else in the Federation might be involved. And if Emperor Zorthak finds out about this—" Maxwell grimaced. He knew that the Zorians would be furious if they learned of the Federation's involvement in the creation of the bioweapon. They would see it as the ultimate betrayal, and they would have every right to. "We'll have to keep this quiet for now," he said. "We can't risk tipping off Admiral Novak or her allies, and we can't let the Zorians find out, at least not until we have the cure and can prove that we're on their side." Reeves looked uneasy, but he nodded in agreement. "What about Dr. Novak?" he asked. "Should we tell her about her mother's involvement?" Maxwell hesitated. He knew that Dr. Novak was working tirelessly to find a cure for the plague, and he didn't want to distract her or burden her with this knowledge. But he also knew that she deserved to know the truth. "Not yet," he said finally. "Let's focus on getting the cure first. Once we have it, we can decide how to break the news to her." Reeves nodded, and the two men set to work, poring over the data and trying to come up with a plan. They knew that they were up against a formidable enemy, one with resources and influence that stretched across the galaxy. As they worked, a message came in from Emperor Zorthak. Maxwell felt his stomach drop as he read the contents. The Zorian leader had somehow learned of the Federation's involvement in the creation of the bioweapon, and he was demanding that all humans leave Zorian space immediately. If they refused, he would unleash the full might of the Zorian military against them. Maxwell cursed under his breath. He knew that they couldn't abandon the Zorians, not now, not when they were so close to finding a cure. But he also knew that they couldn't risk an all-out war between the humans and the Zorians. He turned to Reeves, his expression grim. "We need to find a way to expose Admiral Novak and her allies, and we need to do it fast. If we can prove to Emperor Zorthak that we're on his side, that we're working to stop the Crador and the Rogue Federation faction, maybe we can avoid a war." Reeves nodded, his own expression just as grim. "I have some contacts in Federation intelligence," he said. "I'll see if they can dig up any more information on Admiral Novak and her associates." Maxwell nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. "Good. In the meantime, I'll try to stall Emperor Zorthak, buy us some more time." The two men set to work, each focused on their own tasks. They knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and that they were the only ones who could stop the impending catastrophe. As Maxwell worked to keep the Zorians from declaring war, Dr. Novak and her team continued their tireless efforts to find a cure for the plague. They were so close, so tantalizingly close, but every time they thought they had a breakthrough, something would go wrong. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Reeves worked his contacts in Federation intelligence, trying to uncover more information about Admiral Novak and her allies. He spent long hours poring over classified documents and encrypted communications, piecing together the puzzle of the rogue faction's plans. And all the while, the Crowder continued their attacks, growing bolder and more desperate with each passing day. They knew that their time was running out, that the humans and the Zorians were closing in on a cure that would end their plans for galactic domination. Captain Maxwell felt the weight of the world on his shoulders as he navigated the delicate political situation, trying to keep the peace between the humans and the Zorians, while also working to expose the rogue Federation faction. He knew that one wrong move could spark an interstellar war, one that would cost countless lives on both sides. But he also knew that he couldn't give up, that he had to keep fighting for what was right no matter the cost. He thought of the Zorians, of the millions of lives that had already been lost to the plague, and he knew that he would do whatever it took to save them. And so he pressed on, determined to see this mission through to the end no matter what challenges lay ahead. He had faith in his crew, in Dr. Novak and her team, and in the strength and resilience of the human spirit. They would find a way to stop the Crowder and the Rogue Federation faction. They would find a cure for the plague and save the Zorians from extinction, and they would do it together, united in their common cause, their shared humanity. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, but Captain Maxwell knew that they would not fail. They could not fail. Too much was at stake. Too many lives depended on their success. And so they fought on, against all odds, against all enemies, knowing that the only way forward was through, and that the only way to win was to never give up, to never surrender, to never stop fighting for what was right. "I have an idea," Captain Maxwell said, his voice tight with tension as he stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, Dr. Novak by his side. The Prometheus has advanced shielding technology, far beyond anything the Zorians or the Crador possess. If we can modify the shields to create a massive energy field around the Zorian homeworld, we might be able to quarantine the planet and prevent the plague from spreading. Dr. Novak's eyes widened, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten as she considered the implications of Maxwell's plan. "It could work," she said slowly, "but the energy required to maintain a field of that size would be enormous, and we'd need to calibrate the field precisely to allow for the passage of essential supplies and personnel." Maxwell nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We'll have to divert power from all non-essential systems and work around the clock to modify the shields. But it's our best chance to contain the plague and give you more time to find a cure." As they set to work, news of their plan spread quickly through the ship and beyond. The reactions were swift and divisive. Many of the Zorians, already wary of human interference, saw the energy field as a violation of their sovereignty and a potential threat to their way of life. They argued that the humans had no right to dictate the fate of their world, and that the field would only serve to isolate and weaken them. On the other side of the debate, members of the Earth Federation expressed concerns about the potential military applications of the technology, fearing that it could upset the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. They worried that if the Crador or other hostile species were to get their hands on the technology, they could use it to create impenetrable defenses and launch attacks with impunity. As the arguments raged on, tensions on the Zorian homeworld reached a boiling point. Emperor Zorthak, already struggling to maintain control in the face of the plague and civil unrest, found himself besieged on all sides by those who opposed the human plan and those who saw it as their only hope for survival. In the midst of the chaos, the Crador saw their opportunity to strike. A massive fleet of Crador warships, armed with the latest in weapons technology, suddenly appeared in orbit around the Zorian homeworld, catching the defenders off guard. The Crador launched a brutal assault on the planet's surface, targeting major population centers and strategic military installations. Captain Maxwell and his crew found themselves in the middle of a devastating battle, fighting alongside Emperor Zorthak and his loyal forces to repel the Crador invasion. The Prometheus's advanced weapons systems proved invaluable in the fight, but the sheer numbers of the Crador attackers threatened to overwhelm them at every turn. On the ground, Lieutenant Commander Reeves led a small team of trusted officers on a dangerous mission to gather evidence of Admiral Novak's treachery and bring her to justice. They fought their way through the war-torn streets of the Zorian capital, dodging Crador patrols and battling Rogue Federation operatives, who sought to silence them at every turn. As the battle raged on, Dr. Novak and her team worked frantically to modify the Prometheus's shields and calibrate the energy field. Time was running out, and they knew that every minute they delayed meant more lives lost to the plague and the crater. Finally, with the Crador forces closing in on the Prometheus and the Zorian defenses on the verge of collapse, Captain Maxwell made the fateful decision to activate the energy field. He knew that it was a desperate gamble, and that there was no guarantee that it would work. But he also knew that it was their only chance to stop the plague and prevent the Crador from achieving their genocidal goals. With a heavy heart, Maxwell gave the order to divert all power to the shields and activate the field. The Prometheus shuddered as the massive energy surge coursed through its systems, and for a moment, everything went dark. Then, slowly, a shimmering blue field began to emanate from the ship, expanding outward in all directions like a wave of light. It passed through the Crador ships and the Zorian defenses, engulfing the entire planet in its ethereal glow. For a moment, everything was still. The Crador ships hung motionless in space, their weapons systems suddenly offline. On the surface, the fighting ceased as soldiers on both sides stared up at the sky in awe and confusion. Then, as if on cue, the Crador ships began to retreat, their commanders realizing that they had been outmaneuvered. The Zorian forces cheered as they watched their enemies flee, their hope rekindled by the sudden turn of events. But even as they celebrated, the crew of the Prometheus knew that their mission was far from over. The energy field had bought them some time, but it was only a temporary solution. They still needed to find a cure for the plague, and they needed to bring Admiral Novak and her collaborators to justice. As they set course for Earth, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew that the choices they had made would have consequences that would reverberate throughout the galaxy for generations to come. But they also knew that they had done what they believed was right, and that they had given the Zorians a chance to survive and rebuild. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support me, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. And for every comment that says, "I liked the story," I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.